Good morning, everyone. I've got the great pleasure of introducing you to Dr. Olga Ordeig. I know that most of you, or many of you, know her because she's been a colleague of us for quite a few years. But just to give you some details about her career, Olga is an expert in vitro diagnostics with over 15 years of experience spanning academia, private industry, and global health. She began her career in academic research here, completing the PhD in electrochemistry and conducting postdoctoral work at leading international institutions, including Columbia University and Technical University of Denmark, where she advanced microfluidic and low-chip technologies for biomedical applications. Transitioning from academia to industry, Olga played key roles in several innovative diagnostic companies and startups across Europe and the US, from assay and device development at StarDX and Zoetis to directing R&D department at Corina Project, where she led efforts to bring point-of-care technologies from concept to market readiness. Today, Olga works at the intersection of diagnostics, innovation, and global health as a senior technical leader at FIND and now as an independent IVD consultant. She supports diagnostic manufacturers and public health organizations worldwide, particularly in low and middle-income countries, to strengthen local manufacturing, accelerate technology transfer, and ensure access to high-quality diagnostics. So, Olga, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So, good morning, everyone. And I'm very nervous to be back here after 20 years, but it's a great pleasure. It sounds like an easy journey until here, but has been very bumpy. But I'm very happy to be able to share a bit how I see diagnostics and how I live diagnostics now. And I'm happy that you came because this talk might be a bit far from what you do in your daily research in the Institute. But I hope that it opens a conversation after on how do you see microelectronics fitting LMIC. Okay. So. No? It's not bad. First problem. Is it better I do it with the keyboard?
Yeah, let's do it with the.
How I do? With a mouse? With like just I click or I move like this? Okay. All right. Okay. Problem solved. Good. So basically I would like that we cover 3 topics. First is like why diagnostics are important in low and middle income countries. Second is like how these diagnostics need to be to serve the purpose in those regions. And the third, why it's important that they gain manufacturing independency, so they cut the reliance from the global north. And before entering in how these diagnostics need to be, I want to do one step back and maybe define what does it mean when we talk about low middle income countries or LMIC. So the World Bank is dividing or is grouping the countries in economical regions based on their gross national income. And it divides them or groups them in four categories. Low income countries, it would be the dark purple countries pictured in the image. And they have a gross national income per capita of less than $1,000. The second group is the middle income countries, and they can be divided or split in low middle income and high middle income. The low middle income are the light purple countries, and the upper middle income are the light green countries. And the GNI per capita is between $1,000 and $13,000. The high income countries are the rest of the countries. They are in dark green, and the GNI per capita is above $13,000. So when we talk about low and middle income countries, we are referring to all the countries that they are in dark purple, light purple, and light green. That represents 132 countries in the world and represents 87% of the global population. So we are talking of most of the world's population. And a lot during the presentation, you will see many times I use the terms global south or global north. And I guess that is obvious, is because LMIC are mainly located in the southern hemisphere. But so if we stay in the global level for a little bit more, how do we assess the health of the population in the world? So a lot of times we use terminology like mortality or life expectancy, but these terms do not capture the suffering that a person can have when it has a disease that can be over many years and might not even be the cause of death. So when we have in account both mortality and morbidity, we have a better understanding of the health of a population. And the researchers in these areas, they use like the sum of mortality and morbidity is what we call the burden of a disease, right? And the burden of the disease is assessed with these units that might be a bit strange for scientists to call these units, but they use these units that is called disability adjusted life years. And basically what conceptually it means is the loss of 1 year of healthy life due to early death because of a disease, or because you lose quality of life because of another type of disease. And this unit, what it allows is to compare the burden of different disease across different regions and over time. And this is one graph that I extracted from our wall in data. And basically it's the global burden of diseases, and they divided it in 3 categories. The first category is non-communicable diseases, and that would be strokes, cancer, mental health, all the diseases that you cannot transmit to others. The second one is communicable diseases, so all infectious diseases. And they also put here maternal neonatal diseases and nutritional diseases. And the third group is injuries. So you can see that from 1990 to 2021, at the global level, there is a trend that the highest burden of diseases are non-communicable diseases. But this graph does not, can be a bit, can lead to wrong conclusions, because if we split it by economical regions, then the pattern is extremely different. So we have the same graph of burden of diseases with the same categories, but now it's split by the economical regions we just defined it before. And if you see, like in the top left, there is low-income countries, in the bottom right, high-income countries. And the pattern of the burden of the disease is completely different. In low-income countries, we have communicable diseases. The main cause of suffering and death is infectious diseases. While in the high-income countries, this is even like, it's almost in existence, is even less than the suffer caused by injuries. And this is like something that, it shows very clear how wealth and economy shapes the health of a population. So if we make, if we stay with the low-income countries and we check which are the diseases that contribute more to this burden, we will see that most of them are painted in red. So that means that it's infectious diseases, and we see diseases like HIV, malaria, what else? HIV, malaria, neglected tropical TB, tuberculosis is the first one, right? Neglected tropical diseases. Neglected tropical diseases is a group of diseases that they exist in the tropical area and subtropical areas. They are all neglected because they don't have the interest of anyone, but they are causing a lot of deaths and suffering in this region. And there are diseases like, some of them that are more familiar to us, like yellow fever, dengue, but some, like, I didn't even know that they exist, like chikungunya, Chagas, leishmaniasis. There are Niles River, Lassa. There are many that they are in this region. And this region that mainly is where they are located, the poorest countries. So yeah, so basically also like it's not only this, right? One thing is these countries, because of the environment, they also have weather that promotes the existence of mosquitoes, that they are the main vectors for this type of diseases. So it's not shaped only economically, it's also shaped by the environment of these countries. The economy is also can be seen because they don't have access to clean water, and they don't have good waste management. That also promotes a lot of parasites in water and a lot of other diseases. And finally, they have health systems that completely fail constantly to early identify diseases like outbreaks and contain outbreaks. But this is not only, like, knowing which diseases are prevalent in these places is not the only problem. Like the other problem is that most of the population is not diagnosed. So this was a publication from Lancet from 2021, where they estimated the diagnostic gap across different diseases. So basically it's like the gap of people that has a disease and is never diagnosed, which is around 50%. So we can say that 50% of the population in LMIC are not diagnosed on what they have, either because the diagnostic test does not exist, either is not affordable, or is not designed to fit their context. So if you want to ask something or you want to cut, feel free to do it. Just like, otherwise I keep going. So we just said, right, like sometimes these tests don't exist, but sometimes they are also not designed well for the context of these countries. So how do they need to be these diagnostic tests to serve? So first of all, like, a diagnostic test needs to fit the purpose. And this does not apply only to LMIC, that's applied to all diagnostic tests, right? It needs to fit the intended use, it needs to fit the user and the settings. So you cannot have, for example, a complex PCR test with a lot of pipetting and expect that this is going to be used in community or at home, right? Or have like a test that requires a cold chain and expect that they will use it in community, because that's also not going to make it. And that might sound very trivial, but most of the startups in diagnostics fail because it's like very cool technologies, very good sensitivities, specificities, performance, but they lack to design according to the needs of who is going to use it. So it is something that is very important to have in mind from the early phases. And sometimes as a scientist, we do not have access to this information. And that's why it's so important to have like cross-cutting groups that they can bring you the perspective of the field and the needs of the field that you can integrate in your requirements. And complexity, I think I just put the example of complexity. Complexity is key to determine where this test will be useful. And to talk a bit about this, I'm using like the categories that we normally use at FINE. And basically it groups the IVDs in 4 buckets. And we are going to move from left to the right. Left to the right, it means from more complexity to less complexity. The first group is like the laboratory systems, and you all know what is laboratory systems. They can be complex, they can have different steps, they require other equipment to support it, they require skilled personnel. And that could be like PCRs, ELISA kits, Western blots, all the laboratory techniques that you can use here. Then we go one step towards less complexity and one step towards less complexity means one step towards accessibility. And the near point of care are like benchtop analyzers that still require some laboratory infrastructure, maybe some pipetting, some spinners, centrifuge, but already it requires less training, even if most of the times this is still performed by skilled technicians. And I put here a picture of the Gene Expert Cephite. I don't know if you are familiar with this, but it was launched by Cephite in, I think, 2009, 2010 with the TB test. And it revolutionized the TB, the TB screening, because in less than 2 hours with a single-use cartridge, managed to bring TB testing to many hospitals that they were not having good infrastructures. One step more is what we call true point of care, and that's handheld portable devices that they can be battery operated. We will talk a lot about that. It's very important in LMIC, and that they include disposable materials, and you don't need at all any laboratory equipment, extra equipment, and can be performed by person that it's not heavily trained, let's call it like this. And the last one are the ones that they don't have instrument, they are fully disposable, and they are fully automated processes, and that's the well-known lateral flow test or the deep sticks. So if we now relate the complexity with the healthcare levels that I told you before, you can make the mix of what is relevant to each settings, right? And maybe I want to explain a bit more what it means community, because I don't think here we have that much community testing. Maybe the closest that I can think is when you get those tracks that they go for blood donations, something like this, right? So you have to think in very rural environments where there is sometimes there is not even a doctor, and they just put a table, a tent, and they do a campaign of either vaccination or diagnostics or anything. So it's very, very simple. So in these places, there is no power, there is no access to water, and no temperature control. So everything that is needed to be used in this, that needs to be like, let's see if I can go back. Yeah, it really needs to be in this side, right? It has to be very simple and very portable. For primary care, it's still like not our CAP is a bit more basic, but it will be a bit more of an infrastructure in there, but power is not very reliable. There are a lot of cuts. So if it can be battery operated, it's always like a plus. They have a minimum laboratory equipment and skilled personnel. So the complexity can go a bit higher, and you can go through the near point of care. And then for the hospitals, like, will be quite similar to what we are used to it. So the takeaway for me is, again, like when you design an IVD, design it thinking on the final application and the final settings, and not the way around, because otherwise you may end up with a very cool technology that will not have an access to market in these countries. That's always in the context of LMIC. I'm not talking about high-income countries. So I think that I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I just want to wrap it up. And I try to clearly state the main requirements I believe that LMIC for low and middle income countries need to have. The first is cost. And this, as innovators and as a scientist, might be a bit sad to say, but cost is even more important sometimes than performance, because these countries, they cannot afford expensive tests. So they prefer something that works half, but they can afford. So WHO, the World Health Organization, a few months ago, I think that they published their latest technical product profile. Normally, these are guidance for a specific disease of how the diagnostic test should be and which requirements they need to have. But they published one that was a disease agnostic, more like in general for diagnostics, and they gave reference of prices. And they say like a disposable, like a lateral flow test has to cost like less than $1 per test. And for cartridge-based point of care systems, it should cost like less than $8, so that it has a path for penetrating these markets. And the cost is not only the test. We also have to think in instrument maintenance, if it is the case, other consumables and trainings for the personnel. For the infrastructure conditions, I think for me, the battery, the power is the main thing, because in LMIC, most of the testing is decentralized from the laboratory. Most of the testing happens in primary care and communities. So as the power is not stable, like to have like battery operated or single powered devices. I know that here there is a lot of people working in batteries. So it's like, this is like a key for these societies. And the other one is the conditions. They need to be robust to dust, to temperature, to humidity. Many tests are only validated up to 30 Celsius, because in high income countries, most of the times we test under in places where we have air conditioning, we have more temperature control, but in these countries, they might be sitting under the tent, so it can be easily go to 40. During transport, they can go to 50 Celsius. So also transportation, there is a lot of vibrations in the roads, and they have these shifts of temperature. And no cold chain to maintain the reagents, the cartridge, that's also like very important. Yeah, so I think that lateral flow test, I think this is why lateral flow test is the IVD more extensively used in the global south. And it's not because they are perfect, they are not, but they are cheap, they are fast, they are easy to scale up, easy to manufacture, and easy to use. So they have almost all the checks, right? But they have limitations in sensitivity, they cannot multiplex, or like the limit they start to do, and most of them are semi-quantitative, most of them are qualitative, and they are starting some semi-quantitative. So they have limitations. But also at the same time, and I put a picture here of a reader, now with the portable, cheap readers, battery operated, this is opening a new door for lateral flow tests to expand and overcome some of these limitations. So everything is advancing, and for sure there will be more and more equipment that could be deployed in these areas. I think that nowadays portable readers can be sold for less than $100 per unit in these countries. But lateral flow tests also unlock another thing, and unlock the self-testing. And self-testing, I think we are quite used to it for the COVID-19 antigen test, or pregnancy test, or the glucose test. So these are very well established as a self-test, home test. And the community, or like the global health, it has a trend to go more towards self-testing. I think that there are many products emerging nowadays, like vitamin testing, hormone testing. So there is a trend. But for LMIC, I don't think this is the main reason why self-testing is moving or is exploding. It is especially because it gives it provides privacy, and it provides a safe place for humans to be tested, especially for disease that they have a lot of stigma. So it could be sexual transmitted infections. In many countries, there is a lot of stigma, even low persecution, especially for sex workers, men that have sex with men, or people that inject drugs. So to provide a safe place for these people to have access to be tested, this is extremely important. Another example could be TB. TB, in many communities, they think that tuberculosis is from the lower class. So they don't want to go get tested and get diagnosed. And that delays the diagnosis of many tuberculosis cases and also postpone the treatment. I think an interesting reflection is why in the global north, the infectious disease self-testing are not picking up. And this is because if you you do a pregnancy test and you're pregnant, I'm sure your life will change, but you're not gonna transmit it to anyone. You are not gonna infect anyone. You don't need a medical follow-up, hopefully. So it's okay. For COVID-19, you have to stay home. That's it, right? But what do you do if you get an HIV positive test? You need follow-up, medical follow-up. You need treatment. And there is also a part of mental health, how that patient is going to react, and also a concern of self-medication. So all these concerns are doing that there is a lot of resistance from the global north regulatory authorizations to authorize self-testing for infectious diseases. That makes sense. But again, the context in the low-income countries is completely different. And the barriers that these people need to overcome and the access they have to their global health systems might pay the risk. So there are, of course, like if you do a HIV self-test, or a quick, that is like a gram test with a lateral flow test, then you have like phone number where you can call if it's a positive. You need to have an entire support after it. Yeah, and then that's the lateral flow test. But then what is happening with the other tests? That maybe is something that from here you are closer and you are more involved. What happens with the near point of care, the true point of care? We all know the science is there. We know the technology is there. We know tremendous advancements are done constantly, but why are they not getting access? So again, it's like until the day that they are affordable, small enough, portable, they will not find their way to these countries to serve the population. But recently, there are many companies that they are bringing true point of cares in the market, especially for tuberculosis, but also for STIs like gonorrhea, syphilis, and chlamydia. That's, I think, the main attention at the moment, also for the microbial resistance. And I put some examples here. I have nothing to do with the company, so I'm not advertising them, just like simple examples. And then you have like in the top left corner, you see PlusLife. PlusLife is a handheld device. It's a molecular test. It has a proprietary, it has an IP on their isothermal amplification, and the detection is by fluorescence. The results are in 5-25 minutes. And they are FDA approved for COVID-19. And they just got approved for the provisional WHO PQ, so the ERPD, so they are listed for emergencies for tuberculosis. They are bringing a test for tuberculosis that will cost $3.5 a test, but it's gonna be, everybody's expecting to see what is gonna happen. And another nice thing is that normally tuberculosis is tested by a sputum, but this device is being validated also for tongue swab. So there is people like children or elderly people that they cannot expectorate and release the sputum. So the tongue swab is basically like a scrap the tongue, and they are collecting data and validating for this new sample type. Aptitude is quite similar, but the reading is electrochemistry, I think. And they are also like providing results in 35 minutes. And I think the sample types they do is sputum and nozzle swab. For the PORNAT, it's a bit different because the instrument, so the readout instrument, is integrated in the chip, so it's disposable. So it is also isothermal amplification with a fluorescence readout, and the result is also provided in the chip and is positive, negative, invalid. That's it. And then the Lumira, I think that is also microfluidic cartridge with electrochemistry detection. I believe the first panel they have was clinical chemistry, and TB was going to be the first molecular test they will integrate in this platform. So all of these, they have all the great potential to make it to the market and to change how infectious diseases are tested and have a great impact. So I think that we will see in the next years more and more coming and getting more accessible to people. So now we just know why they need the diagnostics, how these diagnostics need to be. And the last thing I would like to cover is why there is so much emphasis on that they need to also manufacture their IVD systems. And in order to talk about this, I think we can think on the lessons we learned from the COVID-19. So as I told you when we start, most of the population of the world is in LMIC, but they were the ones receiving the less diagnostics during COVID-19. Why? I think that mainly 3 reasons, maybe. First, they don't have their own manufacturing capacity. So they need to import all their tests. And basically they rely in Europe, US, and China. And in a context of a COVID-19 pandemic, everyone wants diagnostic tests. So they need to compete with high-income countries that they can pay more. And at that moment, the market was who pay more receive the test. That's how it is, right? And another consequence that they experience is that many manufacturers stop to produce tests that they are very important for them because they use that capacity to produce COVID-19 tests, right? So for example, I think Unitaid in 2010 make an announcement saying that there was a shortage of 108 million malaria tests because the 2 main malaria test producers stopped producing malaria tests to produce COVID-19 tests, right? And also like the TB community, the tuberculosis community says that during COVID-19, the levels of tuberculosis infections went back 10 years because people was not tested, because they were not test available. So I think for all this, it's just like there is a big push from global organizations that they need to be independent in their manufacturing. First, because they have a different needs and different diseases that they should cover for their own population. But second, to cut this dependency that they have from the north. And bringing the local manufacturers closer to the users is minimizing all these risks. Is by basically trying to contain the risk of disruption in the supply chain. So, but they are starting from zero. So it's like an entire ecosystem that needs to be built, and create manufacturing capacity. It's not easy, and the main challenges that they are facing are maybe these 4. One is like the demand. even if they produce their own test, they need to compete with the test that they import. And a lot of times the population trusts more an imported test from high-income countries than a test made locally. Even if sometimes they are not affordable or not designed properly for them. But they need to also gain the trust of their population that they can build high-quality IVDs at the international standard. And that's is a change on the society beliefs, no? Then they have a very fragmented regulatory system. So a lot of these countries, they don't have the capacity to assess medical devices or IVDs and for registration. And a lot of times they rely or recognize the decisions of other regulatory authorizations. So for example, they can accept the decision of the World Health Organization on a certain diagnostic test as it would be theirs. Or a lot of times they accept the decisions of what they call the regulator, and the regulatory ecosystem they call the Big Five, that is Europe, US, Japan, Australia, and Canada. And sometimes they just go ahead with the decisions that they make over test. But more and more they are starting to develop their own regulatory systems, right? Because they want to gain trust, they want to gain also control. But there is no harmonization between the countries. So that means that if you are a manufacturer in Nigeria and you want to sell in Ghana, you have to go through 2 different regulatory systems, and every time, and that's very costly in terms of money and time. Pricing. As I said, like everybody expects that if you produce closer to your user, price is gonna go down. And it's gonna go down because your labor cost is lower. Also, if you can procure the raw material close by, it should be cheaper. You cut import-export licenses, you cut transport, you cut intermediate persons and companies. So at the end of the road, it has to be cheaper. But that's not the case at the moment, because they need to invest a lot of money in the manufacturing sites. So that is an investment that needs to be returned. And also, like, they rely on technology transfers. That's a lot of times it also costs money. So here it's like what is being asked is that their national governments, for a grace period, and the global procurers like Global Fund, they favor local made products, even if they are a bit expensive, to help them to be sustainable, and then they can reduce the prices. No? So like a commitment from their governments and the global community to support them for a period of time. And then the last one is the capacity. And it's basically, they do not have experience. And a lot of their scientists left the countries, and they are in Europe, in the US, and they don't want to come back because probably this sounds familiar, right? Like, I think it was a moment that was similar here, and they don't want to come back because salaries are not good, conditions are not good. So they have a lot of problems attracting talent and building expertise. So how do I explain this? So one way that is used to help them to build the capacity is through technology transfer. So basically, technology transfer is like a developer in one country has developed a test and then signs a license with one of the local manufacturers, transfer the knowledge, transfer how they produce, and this manufacturer will apply for the regulatory system in their countries or in the countries that they agree, and will be the legal manufacturer and will sell under its own brand, right? So it's like you transfer the knowledge from the what we call sending unit to receival unit. And the technology transfer can be done at different moments of the manufacturing process. The simplest is that everything is done at the original site and they only do the repackaging. And that has been the very first entry, mainly during COVID time. Then they receive the raw material, the parts, and they do assembly. The other one is already like they do from raw materials. Then one step more will be they can make their own reagents. That's difficult. And the finally, they would be also doing R&D. So it's seen as a stepwise approach to support them to build this capacity that they don't have, right? That you cannot go from 0 to 100. And basically, this is my work. This is my job. That my daily job is to support regional manufacturers that they receive technology transfers, help them to integrate it, to have systems so that they can apply to regulatory with high quality products, help them to prepare the studies, and basically support them. And then just to finalize, there are a lot of global organizations supporting LMIC innovation and products and access. And here I put some of the organizations. Some they are very focused in certain parts, some they expand. But if you are doing R&D and innovation with LMIC perspective, I would strongly suggest you to check all these entities because they are regularly opening calls and they are financing research when it has the LMIC perspective. Yeah, so I think that's the end. So I just tried to explain. I know it's not very scientific or very technical, but I've been here to share because honestly, I think I cannot talk about science with such a group of engineers, but this is like the new perspective I have about diagnostics that is from the other side. It's more like from the needs and what it serves and what is needed and how to make it possible that it arrives to the hands that is intended to be. Thank you.
So it's now time for questions.
Thank you, Olga, for this very nice talk. I think it's something that every scientist willing to contribute to this field should know. I have a technology question. You arrived at some point that, of course, the scaling down of point-of-care devices to the point of care in communities requires simplicity. From the perspective of electronics, this means getting less and less components so we can get cheaper and cheaper. And ultimately, there have been people proposing the phone as a transducer. So let's use the electronics already present in the phone to get rid of all the electronics required and so lower the final test, lower the cost of the final test. Do you think that's feasible? Because I've seen many papers going around, but no really products in the market, not even in LMIC or in high-income countries. Do you think that's feasible, or should we stop for example, to increase the sensitivity of lateral flow tests, you take a picture, or you fluorescence, whatever. Do you think that's feasible, or we should stop proposing those approaches?